Hey, it's Joseph here. Today I'm gonna do a bit of a different video as I've got two different devices over here. It's not really a unboxing, it's more of a review and comparison video, I guess, but I kind of slated this video to be somewhat impromptu. It was just more to kind of compare these two devices and tell you my thoughts behind it. And the overall premises of this video is the fact that I have been using Samsung Galaxy S10e, and I'll just call it S10e for short, for about 3 years now. And I really have been enjoying its capabilities along with the overall size of the device. I'm not a big person, so I appreciate small devices and minimalistic and compactness of devices. I don't know if you have been following my channel for a very long time, then you might have seen me kind of leaning towards smaller devices in general. So yeah, this has been my go-to phone. Just to kind of give you brief history, I have used many iPhones in the past. I upgraded every generation up to 5S, I believe, and then jumped onto the Android Samsung devices, S7 and then S8, and then S10e is my kind of latest generation. And there was a recent promotion from my provider that I can just upgrade it to S22 without paying much. So I just kind of looked into it and got the device to test it out, and I have tested out for several days now, and I guess this video is gonna be my overall thoughts behind it. And in terms of the spec, you can basically find that out on short search, and there are some videos that talk about different type of specs of these devices, so I'm not going to be going over them so heavily, but definitely the S22 is much better spec than S10e in terms of the processor and all the cameras and stuff. But I'm actually more keen to compare in terms of usability and the overall size, because that is something that I'm interested in. I don't really like big phones. I really like handling the phone with one hand, and I use my phone with left hand, and I guess that is a bit odd for some people, and this device really fits my hand. I can handle it however I want, and it is quite light, and then I can reach up and bottom quite easily, whereas S22 is somewhat questionable. So I'll get into that a bit further, but just to kind of go over some of the major differences that I feel like is an upgrade to going to the S22. So going up to S22, you're gonna notice that it is a faster processor, and then also it is slightly bigger screen size, and it is noticeable. So it is going to be going up from 5.8 from the S10e to 6.1 on S22. And also the screen refresh rate is going to be 60 Hz on S10e, whilst on S22 it is going to be 120. And the processor and the screen real estate combined together, it really gives you snappier experience on S22. And I did notice in just a general task, not gaming or anything like that, but just going between apps and scrolling through pages and all, it really felt a lot snappier. And also the camera is definitely an upgrade from the 2 camera system on the back to 3 cameras on the back on S22. And also the megapixel, it is definitely much sharper on S22. So if you feel that you are missing out on camera quality of S10e, then going up to S22 will definitely help you in terms of getting much better picture quality. Just to kind of give you the spec, it is 16 megapixel on a standard camera on S10e, and it is going to be 50 megapixels. So yeah, it is going to be much better picture in general that you're going to get out of. However, there are a few caveats, and that plays into the overall size of the device, which was basically my decision factor. And you might notice that I have cases on the phones, and yeah, it is for a good reason. People would use their cases. I do like running them naked, but if you do, then you do run into risk of dropping or damaging, that sort of thing. S10e did ship with the native screen protector on them, so I kind of scratched it in the past, therefore I put on a third-party screen protector. So that's what you're seeing on top here, whereas S22 did not ship with any of the screen protector, therefore it is a bare glass here. However, the case choice is one from Spigen, and it is the same company, basically the same model of case, a thin fit case that I have put on both of these, and they do feel exactly the same. It's just that shaped differently to fit around the phone, and this is to ensure that I have basically same kind of format, if you will, and also the feel of the phone in the best possible condition. But this does play into the overall handling of the device, so I just wanted to kind of be honest about my thoughts behind it. I do have Samsung provided case for S22, and in my opinion, this is probably the best case that I have tried on this phone, and it really does feel nice. Not really rubber, it's more like a silicone type of case, but it is still hard, and it also is quite thin as well. But it kind of suffers from the same problem, which I'll mention later on. So I absolutely have been loving S10e, as I have mentioned, and the reason for that is because, as I have said, the one hand usability. And if I were to switch side, it just fits on my hand a little bit bigger. And if you were to kind of compare in terms of the width, it really is pretty much the same. Even if they were, I don't know, maybe 1 millimeter or 2 bigger, it wouldn't make much of a difference on my hand. And for that, to be specific, the S22 is supposed to be 70.6 millimeters, whilst S10e is supposed to be 69.9 millimeters. So it is effectively about 1 millimeter wider on S22, but yeah, that is very minimal, so I wouldn't say that as the biggest difference that plays into this. As well as the tallness of the device, it is definitely taller, as you can see. If I were to just kind of match the bottom here, if I were to match the bottom, you'll see that it is quite a bit taller, and effectively you've got 6.1 inch glass on here, the screen size, whereas it is going to be 5.8 inch screen on the S10e. So there is a screen size difference. Now, do you want a bigger screen? I don't know, that's completely up to you, but for me at least, I didn't really need bigger screen. Maybe it would be a bigger bonus, but the handling of the device was much more important to me than just the screen real estate. Decreasing the size of the fonts and everything is not a problem. I'd rather have a device that I can handle well. And here is the other thing that we would need to dive much deeper, which is the thickness of the device. By the spec on paper, S10e is supposed to be 7.9 millimeter and then 7.6 millimeter on S22. So effectively, S10e is supposed to be thicker. But you'll notice that if I were to put a case like this, it is definitely thicker on S22 side. And the reason for that is because of the chamfering of the edge on the phones. So let me take off the case so that I can kind of show you and demonstrate that a bit better. The thickness. On paper, surprisingly, S10e is supposed to be thicker. And I think the overall camera bump is supposed to play in this. But as you can see on this side, S22 seems a lot thicker than S10e. And now that is probably maybe 1 or 2 mil at most, or in handling it doesn't seem all that noticeable. However, on S22, although it is on the top edge of the device, only on this side, so as I handle around, my finger is going to generally land on there. And although that may not really impact the overall handling of the device, it does feel quite thin in general. However, because of the edge is actually a bit sharper than S10e, and you can kind of see that S10e is a lot more rounded than S22. Therefore, in overall handling, it does become a bit bigger on your hand. And that impacts a lot in terms of handling. So there you go, my hand will just generally wrap around and the edges will not dig into my hand and just fits comfortably, and I can wrap around about that much. Whereas because the edges are a bit sharper and bigger, it becomes a bit more cumbersome to wrap around, if you know what I mean. And that inherently has been a problem for me. And to make the problem a bit more worse is the fact that when you put these cases around, and I'll put this case that I like, the Spigen's case here, and because the edge is rounded, the case only comes up to the top edge of the device, therefore it doesn't wrap around. And I don't usually put my phone facing down like this, and therefore I don't really need protection on this edge to protect the screen. And also I like looking at my screen and just putting the phone down in this way. And if you were to put the Samsung's case onto the S22, then you'll see that because the edge is sharper, more rectangular, therefore the edge of the case will always sit on the front of the device, protecting the screen if you're the type of person who lays down the phone this way. However, it kind of defeats the purpose of the fingerprint sensor that it is on the screen. So I still don't see the point of putting the phone facing down. But yeah, because of the edge, you'll see that the overall phone thickness also increases, and the amount of finger you need or hand size you need to wrap around increases much further than this phone here. And to make the things worse, to cover the camera bump, they had to make the case that much thicker, I believe. Therefore, the overall thickness of the device really increased a lot, and that really just turns the phone into much bigger phone than the spec states, because it is supposed to be thinner device than this one. And yeah, the weight is actually heavier in S22. It is 167 gram, whereas S10e was 150 gram. It is barely noticeable, and if I were to hold both of them together, yes, it does feel heavier on this side. Yeah, it is not that much of a difference, so I wouldn't really pick on weight all that much. And just to make things a bit worse, on S22 they have removed the headphone jack that existed on S10e, and it was still water resistant as much as S22, and they had expandable storage on S10e, whilst on S22 you don't have that option. Therefore, you're going to have to buy something that is more expensive if you want that extra storage for your device. So yeah, that is kind of the point for S10e in terms of the utility, I would say. And I guess the camera punch on S22 did decrease, and it moved onto the center rather than on the corner. That doesn't really bother me in either case. And I really liked the side fingerprint sensor, and that really became much easier to use than putting my finger on here. I would have to change my phone grip position every time I try to scan my fingerprint on here. So yeah, maybe it is sort of a habitual thing that I just couldn't adjust to, but I can see the point of using your phone laying flat like this and then just simply scanning your fingerprint and getting into your phone is a lot easier. But I don't think that would have been my decision point, if you will. And in terms of the battery life, supposedly S22 has much bigger battery, therefore lasts longer. But because of the 120 Hz screen refresh rate or the faster processor and something, it didn't really last all that long. And I'm the type of person who charges phone frequently during the day, so I don't really need a phone that lasts all day and every day. Therefore, yeah, I don't really care for the battery life all that much, but it didn't last noticeably longer on S22. So I just wanted to report to you that maybe the combination of the processor and then the screen refresh rate, or just S10e being smaller screen size, maybe it consumes less power, whatever. But even after 3 years, I still use S10e to the same amount, and I feel like the battery lasts as long as I want, and I can frequently charge up the device wirelessly throughout my house and office and in the car. Therefore, it is much easier to just charge up my device in general, so that really didn't become my decision factor at all. And another thing that I really wanted to mention, and it may not bother much of people out there, but something that really bothered me is the fact that the camera bump on S22 is on the corner like this as opposed to in the middle. I really like one in the middle. So yes, when you lay your phone flat, and mind you, because of the fingerprint sensor being on the screen, you're meant to put your phone down like this. Then this one slightly elevates towards you, although it is not really intended that way, but at least it doesn't wobble. However, if you were to have a fingerprint sensor on the screen, and you do on S22, and a camera bump on one corner, then if you were to scan, it actually wobbles on you because of this camera bump. And it is somewhat minimized because of the case, and the case doesn't have as much bump. But if you were to actually take out the case, then it really is jumping on you as you scan your finger. It is moving on me. So I don't know, the experience is not as great in terms of the usage. It feels like the camera bump is a bit of an afterthought. And in terms of the camera bump on this case here is a lot worse than this one. And there are some cases that are gonna make that camera bump go away, but it means that they're just having to flush out the entire thickness of the case in order to achieve that, therefore driving the thickness of the phone that much further. And of the Spigen cases that I have tried, this is the one that kind of removes that camera bump, and it fits perfectly, which is quite nice, and it does have this rubberized finish, and I really like that. But it really does add that much of a thickness. I don't think it is as visible, but on hand, if I were to put this phone into the case, the overall size really increases that much more, and you can kind of see it here. It now became really much more bulkier. It is actually wider as well. So you can kind of see it like so. It sits comfortably within the profile, as well as the thickness just became a lot chunkier. Yeah, it became much bigger phone than what it is because of this camera bump that it needs to accommodate. Yeah, to sum up all of this long-winded video, yeah, I think I'm just gonna go with S10e more than 3 years and onwards. I guess maybe I'm just so used to it. Maybe I'm just that old where I can't really adjust to new things, and new things don't really interest me anymore, but that's usually not the case. But in the phone-wise, testing out S22 for a few days, it actually has been about a week now that I have tried this daily, but yeah, I think I'm just gonna stick with S10e because this is much more comfortable on my small hands. It just does everything so well. And mind you, the wide angle camera on S22 was much better than the one here in terms of the quality, but yeah, it still is good enough on S10e, and overall handling is a lot better on this one. And as you can see, in general, I don't put phones in a large case where it becomes cumbersome to handle around. I'm not the type of person who drops phone frequently, so I don't really need as much protection on the phones. I feel like the case is going to protect occasionally, just putting on a surface that is not as smooth as this desk, and it is not going to damage my phone. I'd rather not have the camera bump here, but I guess it does have that on the Spigen case that they have made. But that is okay bump. That doesn't impact my overall handling of the device. So Samsung, I guess you did try, and I guess some people, this is still small enough to handle with one hand, but for me it wasn't. Therefore, I'm just gonna stick with your older device. Yeah, you'll see me continue using it until later. And actually, to that point, my wife actually just picked up Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3, and that is a fantastic phone. I really like it. I don't know if it is a right fit for me, but you know, I'm trying a few things as she plays with it and she really likes it and I like it too. I just don't think it is a right phone for me. Yeah, that one also suffers from the same problem, not being able to one hand. Actually, just the pure increase in terms of the length of the phone makes me that not one thumbable, and I can't really reach without changing the grip or scooting down like that. It becomes a little bit cumbersome to handle the device that way. I just like having to press all the buttons with my thumb here. So yeah, it is a bit of a unique problem for me, or unique taste if you will. So yeah, I just kind of rambled on. This is the first time I kind of featured my phone on the channel too. So yeah, if you like this content, please like this video and consider subscribing to my channel to continue watching different type of contents, but perhaps more phone related video if you were to comment and request. And thank you so much for watching. As always, I'll see you next time. Bye.